11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. That's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to another Every Second Matters. So on the second day of each month, we get together and we talk about the Second Amendment. We've been doing this since the end of 2013. In 2012, some stuff happened and it was exploited, and the anti-freedom people decided that it's time to restrict rights, and Obama came out with 23 executive actions, at least a list of 23 executive actions that he intended to implement, and that caused a dramatic grassroots resistance. And I think it was successful at resisting his just absolute walkthrough of whatever he felt was necessary for safety. And that got people to work together. And after about a year of, the experience, a bunch of us who had been chatting together on YouTube predominantly, but online, had decided that we could sense an apathy, the lessening of tensions, and what's the word? We put down our guard as a community. So in order to defend against that and to give people something to exercise advocacy, we decided to focus on something monthly. And after a series of discussions, group discussions, we came up with the idea of meeting up on the second day of the month, the second day for the Second Amendment, and came up with that simple logo that's out there, and this concept of people getting together and chatting about the rights that are protected by our Second Amendment every month, so that it doesn't get ignored or just lost in the minutia when our rights are not under attack. When our rights are under attack, which they have been periodically since 2013, we have at least attempted to keep these channels open and to exercise our skills and our abilities to get the word out, so that we can become better activists and awareness, whatever that would be called, people, and everybody who's involved in the project can hopefully get more valid, useful information, useful arguments, or useful challenges to opinion out there. And some of this unfactual justification for infringements can be challenged effectively. So we try to get together. Right now we got Tony jumping in from Chattanooga. Thanks for joining.
Hello, good to be here.
Yep, thanks for being here. And I'm here in Arizona, and I got 16 people watching out there. Everything I do online is an effort in new media. So if you are watching me and you're not participating, then you're missing the point. I'm not here to entertain you. I don't put on a show, and I'm here for the long haul. I don't care if this gets views. I don't care if my channel gets views. I care that people are active. And we just got a couple of black eyes in the last months, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever, how long it's been. And people's tendency seems to be to quit whenever they get knocked down. A lot of people don't have the fortitude. They get knocked down. They feel that they put in effort and they didn't get a result. They quit. They walk away. And that's fine. Walk away. We're here to talk to the people that aren't in that group. Bunch of other people get up and fight even more. I guess that's valuable, but smart fighting is better than just getting up and swinging. And then there's people that never get in the game. So it can be frustrating. Obviously, we're living with the apathy right now. We're living with the frustration. If it's not a win and you can't get on board the winning team, what's that called? Fair weather fans. Then it's difficult to get people to give a damn. If there's not a direct threat that we can exploit, it's very difficult to get people's attention. So this is the monthly effort to put a branch out there and a link to people who might want to communicate. We send out links to everyone who's worth a shit in the Second Amendment community that creates content or that participates in the conversation. And we do these on the second day of every month, so it can't be more easy to figure it out, right? It's the second day. And I don't know, we can talk about something if you want, Tony. Otherwise, Tony doesn't need to be on the spot. I don't know if you brought stuff to the discussion today to talk about. We can talk about that. Otherwise, we can just listen to a podcast and see if anybody else shows up.
Well, I would like to say that the creation of the Every Second Matters effort has really helped me to stay focused, because it gives me that once a day, a month, that I have a goal to, even if I do feel like I'm on the losing team, which I don't, it still gives me a goal each month to produce content, and it's kind of like a deadline for me, to maybe that's bad, I don't know, or good, but I still think it's cool to have the effort monthly, the way you've set it up. It's really good.
We'll keep doing it. It's not about popularity, and it's not about winning. Well, I guess it's about winning, but it's about winning through attrition, right? Not through winning through easy fights. So I'm going to go over and look at the Every Second Matters website, and I'm not bitching. I'm just showing you what's going on. It's a bunch of spam. Here's some 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 spam. Spam. And then February 17th is the last time I went in there. And here's somebody asking a legitimate question. Anybody in the Houston area? It's frustrating. This doesn't cost that much, but this is an indication of our lack of awareness and interest. The Every Second Matters website has no cost. It costs something to run, but we're not talking about that. There's no cost to join. The idea is it's a tool. It's an online tool built by us. So there's no ads on it anywhere. It's just a tool to allow you to find the organizations that you think are valid, and to help them, to amplify their messages, to share their events and their accomplishments. Same thing for the states, to people. If we all played zones, for sports, if you play zones, it's different than playing one of the other ways you play sports. So if you're in California, or you have people in California, you care about California, join the click into this California thing. There's 8 people that care about California. There's 7 million gun owners. How much of this is spam? So I got 2 things of spam I got to go weed out. I'm not bitching. I'm just saying this is an indication of our interest. We've got tools. We try to do stuff. We've been doing this for 5 years. There's no recipe, no freaking directions. Otherwise, we'd have followed the directions. Somebody would have paid for somebody else who knows what they're doing to follow the directions. We're trying to figure this all out. We're not really treading water. I think we're swimming in a direction. That direction is towards freedom and away from tyranny. I'll shut up. We got Tony jumping in from New Jersey. Glad to have you back. Thanks for joining. I don't know if you've ever been in a chat with Yankee before, and we got Yankee joining in. So we got 3 people, I guess, that started this whole thing. Tony's been aware of it since the beginning, and I'm going to shut up and start editing some of the spam out of here and let you guys talk about Every Second Matters.
Hey, Yankee.
Hello. Well, nobody else, but I ain't dressed yet today. But once I am dressed today, I will be open carrying, because that's what I do on the 2nd of every month, is to just start conversations about gun carrying, open carrying, whatever, or just the gun itself. I open carry on the 2nd of every month. Luckily, I live in a place where you can do that both legally and safely. You're not going to get shot by police, but for open carrying, I'm not dressed yet. But once I'm dressed, I'll be in fact, here, hold on. I'll just share the picture from my Instagram here, and people can see what I'll be carrying because I shared it on Instagram earlier today. There's what I'll be open carrying today once I get dressed. But like I say, I am not dressed yet. I'm still in flip-flops wandering through the snow over here to my studio. So, but like I say, that's what I do on the 2nd of every month. It starts conversations, and it's not about the what I like to try to tell people when they get on me about open carry. I'm like, it's not about whether open carry is tactically superior to concealed carry, or whether open carry is morally superior to concealed carry, or, in any way superior. It's just about starting a conversation. Concealed carry does not start conversations. even like a t-shirt that says, "Hey, ask me about guns," isn't really going to start a conversation or draw any interest, because most people aren't going to even bother to read your shirt. Having a gun on you will get maybe 1 out of every 10 people to actually see you. Still 90% of people aren't even going to notice. Last time I open carried, I went into a busy restaurant on in the trendy area of Portland over here. Waited outside for 20 minutes before we go in, went in, waited in the lobby for 10 minutes, and then got seated. And then I realized, oh crap, I'm open carrying. I hadn't meant to that day, but I took my jacket off because it was getting warm. So I was open carrying the whole time till I left my jacket in the car. And no one said a thing in a busy Portland restaurant. And I was there for at least 2 hours, and not one person, not even the people I was with, noticed until I pointed it out as we were leaving. So open carrying is a way to get some people to start a conversation, but even then you'll be surprised at how many people pay no attention to you.
Yeah, and maybe somebody took a picture or something, or I don't know.
Maybe.
And then or just saying, like, some birthday party happened, and somebody might be looking at that picture in the future and like, hey, there was some guy wearing a gun that day. It's weird.
Or someone, like an employee might have noticed it. Like the lady seating us, I'm like, how could she not have noticed? But she might have noticed it, but not felt it was her place to say anything. But then later she might have a conversation with other employees, like, oh, there was a guy in here carrying a gun earlier, and they'll all be like, well, no one got shot.
Exactly. And how can they deny? I mean, at least if there's going to be that you're going to kind of force them to that conflict, that internal conflict. They've seen it happen. They know there was no consequence, yet they're told that there's a consequence whenever there's a gun involved. Yeah,
and they get to go and like, hey, and the guy that was open carrying tipped 40%, so I'm not going to complain.
Well, that's you're kidding, but I mean that's really part of it, right? Being a good ambassador as a gun owner is a big part of it, right?
I'm not actually kidding, because I do tip very well. I used to be a server, so I tip very well.
But I'm just saying, being a good advocate, so you're not the guy in there complaining and, oh, my food was too cold, and back 4 times or whatever.
Yeah, you're not causing trouble. You're not complaining about everything. You didn't want to see the manager to get a free meal. You were the guy that came in, was polite and jovial, and sat and had his meal, tipped, and went home.
So that being said, we can go over to Arizona Citizens Defense League's website, and they have a little card, like size of a business card, that you can print out or buy it from them, I suppose. I'm sure most of the state level organizations have something similar. And we're going to find it. It is kind of cool because it's basically it's a subtle way of letting a store owner know, or a business owner know, that as a gun owner, they're restricting, some of the most law-abiding people that are their customers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not going to make it easier to find. Maybe it's in their store. So how do I find the store? Online store.
I don't think I even know the second Tony.
Tony Simon from New Jersey.
Yeah.
Oh, so you guys haven't met. So Tony, why don't you tell Yankee about your project? I know you've been following Yankee. Have you ever had a chance to meet before? Tony's boots on the ground. He's hands-on. He's he's one of the people in the Patch Batch. Actually, everybody in here today is in the Patch Batch. Every Second Matters is in it. Tony is 2A for everyone. It's a boots on the ground organization, bringing people from all walks of life into firearms, from not being aware of them at all or being apprehensive about them. He actually has workshops in New Jersey and surrounding states. Been doing that for a few years now. Works with people in the industry, does a YouTube channel and a podcast.
And his shirt matches my ring, so
there you go. Now I'll quit telling what Tony is. Let Tony talk about himself. Somebody, his mic works. Okay. If you're talking, Tony, we're only getting like every 5th word or something. It sounds pretty bad.
Yeah. I think he's been replaced by a cyborg.
Yeah. I'm in the dead zone. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Right on. We heard that part. You're driving through a dead zone or something.
I got that part, yeah.
So I can't
How long
find
has Every Second Matters been a thing now? Because I can still plainly remember the nights where we were formulating it, but I don't remember, because I'm really bad about knowing if something happened 6 months ago or 12 years ago.
Just tell me about it.
as
crazy.
part of my age. But,
so somewhere in here, I've got about Every Second Matters, and
I thought it was 2012.
well, it started at the end of 2013. 12 is when the stuff happened. So I've got Every Second Matters archived here on the Every Second Matters site. If you go down to the bottom of any page, you click on About Every Second Matters, and you get the first ever organization show was this one, which turns out to be One Bad Marine show on October 8th of 2013. And then we kind of put it together on Yankee Show on December 11th of 13. And then, well, I guess the third, so the first show was One Bad Marines. The second show was One Bad Marines, then Yankees, and then Stone Guy, and so on. So it was the end of 2013 when we started kind of, well, it was really 3 shows, I think, that we kind of came up with the idea. I think it started out with open carry, right? And then it went to open empty holster, and everybody kind of scratched their head about that one. And
yeah, it was everything. It was an empty holster with a cardboard cutout of a gun in it, and it was just plain old empty holster. It was open carry if you can. It was wear a button that says "Ask me about my concealed carry." You know, it was just every idea we could throw at the wall.
And I think it was neat because we had kids that were in school with the whole, and that's a difficult situation when you're in college and trying to do open carry on campus because they're only there for 4 years, and ideally, so it's difficult because they're always kind of transitioning through. So we had a couple of people that were in school and pretty active, and I think at the end of 13, the concealed carry or one of the big national campus carry pushes had just ended or kind of been in one of those cycles. So I think they were looking for, something to help them, and so that kind of put a kibosh on the idea of an open holster because they just couldn't carry anything like that in school. It would be a problem, right?
Yeah, and people are all very hard on the people on campus when they're like, why don't more of these people get involved and carry on campus and test the rules? I'm like, well, because it's not just a legal challenge there. There's also the challenge of it's a private institution as far as accreditation goes. And these people pay thousands of dollars to get their credits, and they have a school blatantly tell them, if you carry a gun on campus, we will not give you your credits that you paid thousands of dollars for. So they're taking an enormous risk that is very likely to not even be able to be settled in the courts very easily. So it's a really touchy thing anyway, because it's very hard to ask someone often who are working their asses off to pay for their education and going so far into debt to get these credits to risk not being able to have them for taking a stance on being
Hey, can you guys hear me now? Does it sound better?
Oh yeah, much better.
All right. Yeah, I was going through a dead zone. Yeah, we just had our 2A, 4E diversity shoot. We just held that last Thursday, 2 days ago, at Gun for Hire Range in Woodland Park. We limit the tickets to 40 only because it just overcrowds not only the classroom but the range. We maxed out. Everybody just came. We had people from every background there. It was awesome. A lot of new people. People had never shot a gun before, so of course we had the safety brief. We introduced Second Amendment groups in the state. NRA, ILA actually had a rep there and left a lot of literature, talked about getting involved. We had a couple of different speakers come up. We have a guy who's actually lives in New Jersey now, who wants to start making 2A videos, pro 2A videos, and he's going to make a series of them. So he was able to be introduced to the class. So it was pretty cool. And Anthony Calandra runs that range. He's running for the NRA board of directors. Got to fill the ballot out for. I forgot what you call that. But they don't like him very much in the NRA because he asked them very uncomfortable questions. So the board didn't recommend him. He had to do it by petition. And we also recorded our podcast right before the event. So that was pretty cool. And I got 0 sleep. So, I was pretty much running on 24 hours of no sleep. Edited it, posted it to the podcast, and then went to work. So hopefully I can get some sleep. Tomorrow I'm waking up and zeroing the cricket rifle that Artisan Tony sent. I actually bought it to the event, but we had so many people booked in the porch that I never got a chance to even take it out. But thanks again, Tony. Really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I know the scope that I put on the other one was like a foot and a half off to the left, so it would have taken you a while to zero it anyway.
Yeah, we were trying to squeeze a lot of stuff in. The event starts at 6, and I got there at 3:30. But set up everything else you got to do. I love it though. I mean, it's really exciting because I see the ticket sales online go on, and we went in, and it was like 19 people had purchased tickets by the time I got there. I was like, all right, that's a respectable number. We can handle 19 people, get a lot of shooting done. We have food, we have prizes, we got the pizzas. I was like, all right, I know what to do. And then another 20 came in and paid cash. I was like, wow, okay. And we just moving right along. It was great. I don't even know what these guys were. We got a young guy who just became a Second Amendment advocate, following Maj Toure and Black Guns Matter out of New York. And looking into that, he heard about me in Jersey, and he's been bringing 4 or 5 people every time. 4 and 5 new people, Black, Hispanic. I don't even know because it's kind of weird to ask. But just a lot of young people in their early to mid 20s are coming out and being part of this and being excited about it. So we're growing. I mean, this is year 4. We're going into this, and we've been growing every year. We're going to be, I'm working on getting in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, because there's a range there that said for 2 years they're interested. We're going to see. We have a range down in Maryland that talks about it, and I have a connection in New York State. I just have to work through New York State rules.
Is that the one shoot? Do y'all have any other shoots during the year?
No, I have a shoot every other month, and for the diversity shoot at that location at Gun for Hire Range is every other month, and I'm going to try to wedge the other diversity shoots in alternating months. Plus, I have the Minuteman Challenge, which is like a friendly first step into competition shooting. 200 rounds, 2 magazines, to get people to actually shoot their guns. Because if you're not using your gun and it's in the closet, it might not be relevant to you. So we have this event where you shoot different types of firearms. Like this month's might be AR-15s. Next month's might be semi-automatic handguns. Then we may do lever action handguns. And if you don't even have that type of firearm, come anyway, we'll provide it. We're trying to get people to shoot to make the Second Amendment relevant to them. And we have training classes. So all that's on our schedule.
I have one question about that organization you're speaking of that you run. Do you all have any targeting specific audience, or do you target any specific audience? Are you targeted more towards urban areas or income levels or anything? Because I know a lot of organizations kind of leave out the urban areas when they're dealing with these gun rights groups and these gun awareness groups. And it's been my experience through life that poor white people who tend to be more suburban or rural love guns. Poor urban people or tend to hate guns, and especially poor urban Blacks and Hispanics tend to see guns as things the bad guys have that ruin our neighborhoods. So I was wondering if you have any specific outreaches towards, like urban younger people.
Well, that's who comes. That's the whole thing. It's an urban area. Okay. Woodland Park is actually West Patterson. So, yeah, it's an urban area. It's 20 minutes outside of New York City. And, yeah, we have a lot of Blacks, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Asians. So it's pretty much the mixed bag. Sometimes, depends on which event, what time of year, you'd have more maybe white people than other times, like older middle age. But, people have kids in school. It depends on the age demographic. Last night, I think the oldest guy was like in his mid-70s, and the youngest person was probably in their early 20s. So it's a range. I don't target anything. Go ahead.
I like to see that because I see so many of these outreach events, and they're usually in like an urban area near Chattanooga. And I'm like, well, great. Then you're spending your money preaching to everyone that was already pro-gun and then had positive. And you hardly ever see. Only thing you see in the big cities and in the urban areas are gun buybacks and stuff like that. And it bothers me when I see that.
Well, the funny thing is, since mine is not an organization, like I'm not recruiting people, I'm not taking from anyone, that gets other groups to come in because my ego is not involved. I don't have to worry about how many members I have or a membership drive. The purpose of mine is to get you to introduce your Second Amendment group to whoever shows up. If you're a trainer, volunteer, I'll give you a port, you bring your firearms, and hey, you can give everybody that comes through that port your business card and tell them what you do. But my purpose is to get guns in people's hands who've never touched them before, regardless of their background, and open their eyes up to it's not a murder machine. And the guy talking to you is a regular human being with kids. That's another reason we bring food in, is like you're eating with people, you're sitting down, you know what I mean? We tell jokes, we introduce people, and we talk about the Second Amendment in New Jersey and our stupid laws, and we all tie it in. And as far as politics, we don't know. This is about the Second Amendment. I don't care. Don't come in here wearing a MAGA hat, because we're trying to welcome people, not make them more standoffish. And we can have a conversation as long as everyone's polite.
I like the aspect of bringing in food because food is a great humanizer, and it creates a common ground
We
point
also
for
have
everyone eat.
Yep.
I always when I used to do a lot of work with people who had mental disorders or, one thing wrong or another, I would always bring people that were I don't know if I would say detractors or skeptics. I would make sure they came and ate with them, especially people like that were new employees inside of the mental health system and had their prejudices and stuff about these people. I would make them come during the lunch programs and watch and eat with the people, because there's something very humanizing about watching somebody else eat with you. And that's actually a good tactic.
Well, I thought it was. Plus, it kicks off at 6:00.
Yeah.
And it ends at 9. So yeah, you're gonna try to get up to North Jersey, and have dinner? No, I'll provide you some food. Here's 2-3 slices of pizza and something to drink. We have prizes that we give out. When I first started it back in the day, what happened was I went to testify in front of the Jersey Assembly back in, I guess, 2013. Right after Sandy Hook, Jersey went on a tear trying to pass every gun law there was. There were 200 pro-gun people. I was the only black dude in the room that was pro-gun. And I was like, we need to recruit to get people of color to come out. I see them at the range, but why aren't they participating in the political side? That's where the fight is. So I contacted the groups that already met with my own advocacy and go, do you have anything reaching out to black people to try to get them involved in the political side? And everyone was like, no. How do we recruit black people? And I'm looking at them like with the RCA puppy dog look with my head cocked to the side. I'm like, food and free stuff, just like everybody else.
Yeah, everybody.
There's no difference. So I called. The reason I keep bringing up Anthony is because I called Anthony Calandro at Gun for Hire Range, and I was like, Anthony, because I'd taken classes there as an NRA instructor. I took all of my classes through him, and he always talked about urban outreach. I contacted him. I said, hey, Anthony, I'd like to have, like, in February. It was February then. I'm sorry, February 2015. I said, Anthony, could I have, like, a classroom for a meeting to actually bring blacks into the Second Amendment legislative side? He was like, what about Thursday? I'm like, not this. Give me a week, dude. So I went back and I posted on all the pages that I was a member of that we would have something like that. And you know how Facebook is. Almost 30 people said they'd come. And 4 people showed up 2 hours late. But that was the first one. And he told me just to keep doing it. So we haven't stopped yet. We do it every other month. It's like,
No, I noticed that the podcast, are you calling it a podcast? But you say it's episode 51. So is that 51 diversity shoots so far?
That's 51 podcasts that we've done. Yeah, actually 52, but I didn't name one of them podcast. I did number it.
And that's, somewhere between 10 plus, I'm guessing on average per shoot, that you're bringing people either in or giving them that kind of introduction that they, accumulate a customization, I guess, if they come back a second time, or if they've experienced it before and they're looking for more of a a friendly place to hang out with guns instead of, maybe just going to the range on their own,
Well,
completely alone.
one is the friendly environment. It's inclusive intentionally. The other is, I tell people, if you're at work and you're a gun guy, they know you as the gun guy at work, but you're not really. You just own guns and not afraid to talk about them. And these people are past, like, take me to a range, take me to a range, and you know you're not ready for that. Bring them to a diversity shoot. Bring them to a diversity shoot. We'll take care of them. You go over there and shoot your guns or shoot other guns, and we'll handle your friends. You don't have to worry about them or even concentrate on them. Same if you bring family members. You know you're not a trainer. You're not going to teach your wife, grandma, mom how to shoot. Bring them. I'll introduce them to people that do. Pressure's all off you. Eat food. Try to win a prize, and just have a good time with your family. That's one of the aspects of what we do and what we're looking for. And coming back the second time, usually if they come back a second time, they'll bring a friend who's never shot a gun either. And it just grows the community. And these people become friends, especially ones that come multiple times. They'll give everybody their social media thing, and just next thing you know, they're talking and they're joining groups. And that's great. That's what I want.
So I'm going to take a second. Well, I'm going to actually change the course here unless somebody has something to bring up that I'm cutting them off. So this Every Second Matters, we've been talking about, it's been going on for it's going on 6 years now. It'll be 6 years this year. I don't think anybody's doing it because we want to tread water. So we're certainly not doing it because we want to exploit any kind of tension or fear. We would rather get to a place where together we accomplish a better Second Amendment place in the country than we've had. And ideally we'll have done that working together. That example will lead to our descendants, and they'll stay united, knowing that a strong Second Amendment advocacy core keeps the country and the rights protected by the Second Amendment available. So that's our goal. And we know that that's not, it's lofty and it's theoretical or whatever, but to not just talk about everything we've talked about before and to keep the conversation moving. I think we've got some opportunity and some potential here. And like I said, I'd like to change the topic here, or the course of the discussion a bit. And if Tony from 2A for E is going to be here for a bit, you're the one I'd like to focus on, because the others of us, I think, are already familiar with this concept. But just from the way Tony's described his diversity shoots and the way, and we've talked to him in the past about him and where his project has, how it's developed over the years and the directions it's taken. Not because he sat down one day and strategized it, but because he's willing to fulfill the need that he's discovering people have. And they didn't know it, he didn't know it, but together they're figuring it out, and that's evolving over time, and it's taken effort to do that. So he's bringing people into the fold, and just like when you see, anything, you talk to 100 people, you get 3 or 4 that are interested. You might bring hundreds of people into the mix, and not all of them are going to stick around, but they've all certainly experienced Second Amendment in a great way. But you've got a lot of potential that's gone through the shoots there. And I'm going to kind of mix a whole bunch of things up here, but ideally encourage you and everybody else who might be listening to get on board. So one of the issues you've got is financing and funding. And you didn't say it in this explanation right now, but I'm assuming, and from past talks with you, you've got a 9-to-5, and I'm guessing would be more than happy to do the 2A for everyone as a full-time gig. But of course, like everybody, you've got real life situations, and you can't just jump off and do that kind of stuff. You're not independently wealthy. In the past, it's been difficult to fund things like this because the funding sources available to us have been traditional, which means we have to find somebody with a lot of money and appeal to them. With the democratization of information and means of communication, one of the pieces, or one of the tools that's come from this whole internet and this ability for us all to communicate and work together are the crowdfunding platforms, either the Indiegogo or the Kickstarter or the GoFundMe, for funding projects, individual projects or campaigns, but also the Patreon, which allows people to fund projects that they seem worthy. in other words, to help participate financially in the creation of content that they want, that they find useful and valuable. Now, a lot of times that's content, but it's no means limited to just the creation of content. What Tony is doing with 2A for Everyone, boots on the ground, actual bringing people into the mix, going out and doing stuff, working with ranges and human beings, that can be very, or can be funded very easily. And number one, you've got all the people that are already familiar with the crowdfunding, and I'd like, ideally, I'd like them to know about your project, because so often they're, at least from my experience, they're funding my products, my playing cards or a patch or a something like a thing, and that's not the only way you can use these things. There's people that create content, they create videos or history or something that people value, and they pay for the subscription basically to that. But they could, I think that if people who are aware of who are interested in funding and find that satisfying and a good way to spend they find it as an interesting way to spend their money, if they knew about organizations like yours that are actually doing stuff, changing people for the better, I think that they'd be all over that. So I guess getting towards that, couple of things. Of course, we've got the patch batch going, and that's really one of the efforts of that. Is I've talked to people like yourself and Kevin, talked to people like Flora Carey and others who would certainly benefit from a lot of funding, but haven't experienced the crowdfunding things in these ways. So it was an effort to, or it is an effort to get everyone some experience, not just the projects involved, but the audiences that you reach, to let our audiences who are familiar with crowdfunding know about you, and your audience who aren't maybe familiar with crowdfunding, not only be aware of all the other projects and things that are going on out there, but the idea that they can fund a project like yours. Because I can only assume someone who gets experience for the first time with a firearm, I think, well, I don't know because I kind of grew up with firearms, but I suspect people that are adults and get experience with a firearm for the first time, you remember that whoever it was that was your introduction to firearms, your what would that be called? Like your
mentor,
right? So I would suspect that for something like $2 a month or something, if you truly brought them into a sport that they enjoy, ability to protect themselves that they never had before, aware of a freedom that is constantly at risk that they didn't even know that they had to fight for. I would think that people would love to fund your project, and just your alumni alone, you could grow in size and abilities through that concept. Oh, then he dropped out. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that because this is an interesting month. I don't know if you guys follow Liberty Doll out of Massachusetts.
I just wanted to add one thing real quick. It's not just his, alumni. I mean, I would be more than happy to throw $10 a month at something like this program if it had a funding source like Patreon. I mean, I'm not someone who's going to get. That's one of the things that angers me so much about the gun community. Not just that a lot of them are cheap asses who bitch about how nobody ever does anything, but then when people do something, they're like, "Well, I ain't helping him pay his rent."
That's one of the reasons I brought it up. I saw Pincus. You put up that thing saying, "Here, I support people." It's freaking awesome. And then Pincus, right? Oh, what did he say? Something like, Pete, the fuck did he call it? Anyway, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, this is people, everybody's got to make a living. And I think it's entirely valid to have venture capitalists. I mean, products exist because individual venture capitalists saw the potential and either saw that it's necessary for some reason for this product to exist. It's a better product, it does something better, it's better for people, or they can make money on it. Both are valid reasons to fund a project. But where does it say anywhere in capitalism that an individual is the only person that can fund with capital? This concept of letting it go to a bunch of people with a couple of bucks a month, the power there is amazing.
Yeah, it's far better, I think. And I mean, and this is not a personal slam against Rob Pincus. If I wanted to make a slam against him, I would. And I probably could. Everybody could for somebody. But when you spread the power out, when someone is doing something solely for the benefit of it being beneficial for their society, like what this guy is doing, and you get 1,000 people with $2 a piece, that means more to me than some guy who makes his money selling overpriced gun classes to people who can afford to spend, $1,000 for a weekend. That's such a tiny percentage of the the population driving the message. That one small percentage of people, I can't afford to spend $1,000 for a weekend of training. But whereas if you do it the way where it's 1,000 people with $2 each instead of 2 guys with $1,000, the message is much broader. The message is much more effective. The message has more people involved in it, and it actually tends to become more the message than it is the money. Because when your business model relies on a dozen people, whether you tend to cater to those dozen people in wallets. When model on 1,000.
Hold on, Yankee. You're breaking up there. When your business model depends on a dozen people, and then it broke up.
When your business on a dozen people wallets, then you tend to cater everything you do to what's best for them. When your business model depends on thousands of people with $1 or $2 piece, your message the out, not about the people supporting it. So I think that's an even better way to get things done socially, is the big bucket of people, each with just a little bit of money.
You broke off there, but I think we all agree that's the. Go ahead, Tony.
I don't know. My wife actually called and Hangout kicked me out of the Hangout. So I heard Rob Pincus' name. Rob actually helped us out. Rob's from Jersey. I came talk about cold calls. I heard he was going to be at a range in Jersey. I knew he came from Jersey. New Jersey Second Amendment Society was actually hosting Rob speaking. So I came and I crashed the party. I told him what we were doing. He donated a bunch of stuff off his truck from the PDN network. And he was like, you need to get sponsorship in the industry. I'm like, how do I do that? So I started cold calling the industry. And it took a lot of work. It took going to NRA annual meetings and talking to these people. It took going to it's face-to-face and getting business cards and making phone calls. And then Maj Toure was like, dude, do you have a Patreon? And I'm like, what's that? And he explained that, and he told me to get it, and I didn't. And he calls me up on the phone, dude, get it. And we have a few patrons, and that's cool. But we started giving stuff away over there. Actually, one of the guys won a knife. Car Arms donated some Spydercos to us. I have another friend that just got into the laser engraving business, so he put our logo on the opposite side of the Spyderco, the Spyderco logo, and we numbered them. So Ray DeJour won knife number 1 as a patron. And he's one of the guys that actually comes and volunteers at our event, which was awesome because I was able to present it and at least let a room full of people know how they could support us on a couple of bucks a month. Hopefully someone comes through, because it's not like I'm making a living off of it, but it would help because I have the world's oldest iPad and it's broken with a cracked screen, but that's what I work with, my iPad, my telephone. My laptop I almost given up on because it's just old. So hopefully some of this stuff actually helped me operate this thing more efficiently.
See, and one thing I will say opposite of Rob Pincus, I think corporate sponsorship should be your secondary. It's great for donations of items to give away, things like that. But when you start becoming too involved with corporate, you become a corporate shill, like a lot of the bigger names are. It's much better to spread your support over thousands of people who support your message and support your movement than it is to rely on an industry that isn't concerned about what's best for everybody. They're concerned about what's best for sales. So I think Patreon's the way to go.
Yeah, as they've proven with this last incident that has the internet on fire. Look, they can give me free stuff. They can give me products and we can review because we do reviews on our podcast. It's a short segment. But I'm also on the Firearms Radio Network, and we do reviews there, too. It gives me material. But, yeah, you will not own me. I have a real job. I will be cool with doing this through New Jersey as a grassroots campaign. I don't need to be funded big time by someone who thinks somehow I'm going to drag their party line. It's not happening. You help me?
And what is your Patreon? What is your Patreon name?
2A4E Podcast.
2A4E Podcast.
I'll put it in the side chat.
I picked up this term from an interview. Was that Killer Mike and Coleon Noir? did, and I picked up this one little part talking about allies. I will pick up anybody as an ally if it's going in the same direction. You start donating to nothing but gun Democrats, and you don't push a 2A message. What are you doing?
I mean, you're doing something, but
let the market. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm not here to paint whatever, but there's a totally enough pie for everything. We've got something like on the conservative side, 40 million gun owners. There's no channel that has anywhere near a portion of that. So as we bring more people into the fold, we give them more interesting stuff to look at, some variety and some nuance. We'll see more and more people experience it and bring their other interested people on board. As people get more talented with the tools and the tools become simpler and less costly, which they do every single day, then more and more organizations and areas of interest will be present online, and there's no need to scorn anything. There's lots of effort being done out there. Some of it's a waste of time or whatever, but let's focus on the positive side. I just linked everybody's Patreons out there. What we're talking about, Pincus, I don't want to throw stones here. Pincus basically just posted a hashtag plead Treon with a little facey thing, and I don't know if he's just trying to be funny or what, but that's the concept that, you know, the hat out, the tip jar, and a lot of people who actually use their Patreons as a tip jar. Maybe they have other funding things, or they don't cost a lot to do their, you know, if they're doing a lot of research or something, it just takes time and it's something they're going to do anyway. So everybody's got their own, you know,
My Patreon
place. So some people think of Patreon as a tip jar, and others, though, it can be. I mean, it is literally, it pays my mortgage. Yankee throws $50 a month at us. $30 of that goes back out to other Patreons, but you know, that $50 is paying a bill every month. Like, that's literally paying bills for some of us. And to discount it or to just laugh it off, I guess that's why I brought attention to it. I'm not trying to scorn any particular.
I want to add this. Some people might think of Patreon as just a tip jar. Patreon completely 100% funds me being able to give upwards of 7 guns a month to people in need. So that Patreon goes directly to that. That's all it pays for. So it's not just a tip jar for everybody. For some people, I know probably at least 50 people out there right now that have handguns that would never have been able to afford one, that Patreon is far more than a tip jar to them. It's how they received that firearm. It completely paid for it. And it bothers me when people in the gun community are so easily manipulated by people like, you know, Archon of Assad for their agenda to promote their own self-interest, to where they're convinced to, like, I'm not going to support Patreon on principle. Well, you're not hurting Patreon. Patreon's growing at record rates. What you're doing is being manipulated into not supporting the gun rights supporters. You're damaging them, not Patreon. And all a company like PayPal has to do is like, hey, let's give the gun people a tiny reason to not do the thing they've been doing all along that we don't like. We don't like that they're using their PayPal and their Patreon to support this pro-gun message. So let's, you know, stir butter and let's make a lot of them. And it doesn't hurt us. It just hurts the creators. And so many people in the gun community are so intellectually lazy for that shit.
Yep. E-begging, I think that's the name they call it. And I'm like, well, I'm doing a lot of work here, and I've been doing it out of pocket. For the first 2 years, I charged nothing for this. Zero. Just come out. Hello?
Yep, you're still here. So, okay. So another thing, then Yank kind of touched on it before, is that let's just, you know, just put numbers on it. Let's say 1,000 people, which isn't an unreasonable number. A lot of us have much more reach than that. People can attain that on a reach with almost any area of interest or any particular focus on a hobby or something, or in this case on activism. So with that 1,000 people, and let's say it's $2 a month, which would be $2,000 a month. I mean, I don't know, in anybody's book, that's a lot of funding, and that can allow people to, you know, projects to flourish and to grow and to expand. And then I don't know if $2,000 a month is enough for most people to live off of, but it's certainly enough to devote a lot of time to maybe take their 9 to 5 and make it a part-time gig or something that they do on a consulting basis. And then what you end up with is 1,000 people who, like Yankee said, you're not beholden to a single person or a a couple of people, and if something happens, or if there's a fluctuation in the economy and they have to drop funding, your project's at risk, or if they do something to get a black eye,
or if you offend somebody, or if you say something that's important to
like
say, but it's not popular.
Right.
But
if they have a problem, or if they just maybe they get big, something successful happens to them, and they're just no longer in their, their realm. They're in a bigger pond or something. So, there's reasons and whatever, but that's traditional. I like to look at what opportunities we have going forward. And when you've got just 1,000 people that are funding at that level, that's 1,000 people you can be much more intimately, have an intimate conversation with. I remember from my days of growing on YouTube, I forget the actual numbers, but it had to be in the tens of thousands where you can no longer keep touch with people. There's just too many people to actually have conversations. You can remember an icon here and there, and you can remember a name, but without something like a gun channels or an actual community to get to know people. It gets, look at anybody's chats. Once they get to, you can all figure out the number, but it gets pretty large. With the crowdfunding concept, though, you don't have to appeal to such a large number that your content needs to get vanilla. Your content doesn't have to be boring, appeal to everybody, garbage. It can be interesting, it can be valuable, and it can be specific. And you can have a real relationship. People say, I do not like the color red, and you keep using it. Like, you start using the color blue, and you can actually have a conversation with those people and react to them. And it can actually be way more fun as a content creator, much more fun as someone who's experienced in content. You have ownership in it. You're a participant in it at another level. And for the people that want to discount that, not only is it petty, but it's also, I think, a detriment to the potential that we have as a community, as a gun community, and then as a culture. Because everything from Hollywood is, programming. It's with an agenda, and it's disseminated from people that have had historically the ability to disseminate that content. We're moving beyond that, and every attempt that these people have to crap on the ability to grow smaller stuff up is really just I think it's a desperate clinging to that old, we've got an audience, or we've got the pipeline, and the heck if we're going to let everybody start experiencing all that's out there, because we won't have this huge hose anymore.
I think one of the best things that ever happened to some of the gun channels on YouTube was the demonetization of gun channels, because up until that point, a lot of channels were big enough that they were making a fortune off of just YouTube, like $20,000, $30,000 a month off just YouTube, like your Hickox and stuff. When that went away to an extent, they had to find other ways to support themselves. A lot of them went to becoming corporate shills or NRA shills, but a lot of people discovered that they could make more money on Patreon than they ever made on YouTube, and that they can be more honest with their message when they're not beholden to YouTube or corporate sponsors. Because a lot of people are like, well, how come people like Mac and them never called out the NRA before? Well, I'm like, because if they did, the gun community is very fickle. Half of them would have stopped watching their videos, and that would have cut their income in half on YouTube. Now, when they're supported by a core base of people that actually believe in their cause and their message, they don't have to worry about that. So they can say things that aren't quite as popular. A lot of gun channels now aren't worried about how many views their video is going to get, and how much money it's going to get from YouTube, or even how much a gun manufacturer is going to pay them to do a review. They're worried about how many people are going to stand behind them because they do the right thing, and how many people are going to keep supporting them on Patreon. That's been totally positive for the online gun community as far as I'm concerned. And the other aspect I want to point out is people who like to say, well, I don't want to give them money. I hear so many people when I say, well, why aren't you at the rally today? Or why weren't you at the rally yesterday? Well, I've got to work. Well, then how can you say I can't participate because I got to work, but then you call out other people that are the big names in the gun community and go, well, I don't want them to have to not work. I want them to go to all the meetings and work. Well, you got to help them out there. You got to make it to where they have enough money to go down to part-time so they can go to all the meetings. That's why we all get together and do it, so one person can go out and be at every meeting. And so I never have understood that whole jealousy, cheapskate garbage. It's like, even in this chat here, when I spoke a moment ago about how my Patreon buys free guns every month for people in need, one person in the chat, Liberty's Warrior, great Yankee, but you don't even make content for us patrons though. Why can't you give to the people that support you? If you're supporting me to get something back, then you're supporting me for the wrong reason. And I love the name Liberty's Warrior, because I would ask you, what have you done for the Second Amendment if you're such a warrior, other than sit here and shit on things other people are doing for the Second Amendment, like that comment. But, you know, that's everything that's wrong right there. What am I getting back for it immediately? You know, that's not the point of this. I just donated to your Patreon. I don't give that so that I get something back. I give that so you can do more. I give $50 a month to GWebs. I don't do that so I can get something back. I do that so he can do more. If you've got the attitude of what am I getting for it, then you don't understand the fight at all.
No.
And the concept of $2 accumulating, when you did that $5 thing, that was amazing. So imagine GunTube out there. Night Striker has a link and hasn't joined us for some reason. You know, GunTube. He's over there doing that on, last time I looked, I'm gonna go look at his Patreon right now, $50 a month. It's ridiculous. He's a pro 2A hosting platform that's looking at the future. $59 a month, 21 people. If that was 2,000 people, we'd have a third platform out there that doesn't need to be beholden to anybody, like Yankee's saying. Imagine a 2A hosting platform that's just thinking about us.
I'm laughing because when Yankee said 1,000 people with $2, my imagination has not gotten to the point to even imagine what I would do if I had $2,000 a month available. You know, right now, I'm glad for everybody that's donating to us. It's freaking awesome. And we're doing the best we can with what we have. And yeah, I want to actually do diversity shoots in New York and know that we can fill it up and I don't have to worry about making the price of pizza. You know what I mean? Like, I hope it covers the price of pizza. I use my, what do you call that, income tax return to go to NRA. That's what I use. My wife finally figured out that those aren't vacation spots, by the way. She's like, wow, we're going to Atlanta for vacation. Oh, yeah, but I happen to have the NRA convention there, too, so I'll be gone for 5 days. Yeah, she figured it out. She's not coming in Indianapolis. But I've done it on my own dime. I really appreciate anything anybody gives to us. One of the guys donated 1,000 rounds that he won at the ranch. He donated to us Thursday night. That was awesome. What does that do? Well, that allows me to give ammo to the volunteers that are bringing their own guns to shoot. So now people can shoot more than 5 rounds, you know what I mean, while they're out of one gun. They can shoot multiple times, or they can go through and everyone can get a chance to shoot. It just really helps out anything you can give. We say, buy us a cup of coffee once a month. That's all we ask for, if you're listening. You know what I mean?
Right. So let's talk about the power of that. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is Liberty Doll. I asked before, does anybody know Liberty Doll? I think she's out of Massachusetts. YouTube. She does like 10-minute commentaries once a week, usually. Well researched and documented, and then they're interesting. You know, she talks about a topic or whatever. And anyway, she just posted something on her Patreon that because of her 9 to 5, it conflicts a little bit with her political stuff. She's a libertarian, and I guess that's conflicted a bit in Massachusetts. So she's making the decision, I guess, to go to part-time on her 9 to 5 and go more full-time based on Patreon support. And if you haven't checked out Liberty Doll, holy crap. Like, talk about somebody that we need on the Second Amendment, a voice that we need for the Second Amendment. I'm going to link to her Patreon as well. And that's the kind of thing that gets me encouraged that there's people coming onto the scene. She's not brand new, but she's, you know, newer than Every Second Matters. And along with a lot of other people that are coming onto the scene lately. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong buttons here. I'm trying to get Night Strike a link. I just think it's amazing that she's going to be able to make that decision. Unfortunately, it sucks that she's having to make the decision based on a political pressure type of thing. But the idea that she's able to, with, you know, with, what's am I trying to say, like with reasonable expectations, you know, make the decision to do this. And like I say, if you haven't experienced her channel, go check it out. I think you'll thank me if you like this Liberty at all. You're going to like her channel. And it's a great ambassador type of channel for.
Stop costing me money.
Huh?
Stop costing me money.
You take out of my 50.
No, I
But
don't know anybody.
Anyway, so I just think that that's awesome to see something like that. You know, we've got an important year coming up in 2020, and you know, it's not doom and gloom, but we certainly have opportunities here, and it's neat to see that that's another resource that's being added to the mix. So now let's talk about funding. I know there's people that are concerned about Patreon for whatever reasons. Who cares? But there's alternatives, and we shouldn't be.
Can I say something before you go on?
Sure, sure.
Because I don't think that Tony, not Artisan Tony, but the other Tony, I want to call him Black Tony, but I think that for some reason that feels racist to me. But I don't think he's reading the side chat. I donated to your Patreon, but I want you to send me some information on your organization because I would like to donate a free firearm to do a giveaway to try to promote your Patreon.
Awesome.
So if you heard that, just get me the information for your thing because I'll arrange for the free gun from the TYMP Pistol Project, and then we'll use that as an online giveaway to promote people going over and donating to your monthly Patreon.
I have another cricket too, that we could give away also if you want one.
Tony's not, he's probably on a phone or whatever, not able to unmute, but we'll be having another get together focused on the 2A patch project. And maybe when Tony's at a regular computer, we can figure out all the details of that.
And I do want to do the same thing for GunTube also. So we need to get onto that too. I want to do a free gun giveaway to promote GunTube's Patreon so we can get GunTube rolling.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were going to talk about funding. So I think Patreon's valid. I mean, all the reasons people give me when I say how YouTube is dying and you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket and wasting your time on YouTube, chasing giant numbers, which might be in other countries or of age groups that just aren't, you know, of the people that you're focused on what you're trying to put out there, that, you know, having your own presence out there on the web and having presence on multiple platforms is valuable. Anyway, so the same thing applies to funding. So as much as the people will resist that and say that YouTube's the biggest platform and it's the second biggest search engine, and by having a presence on YouTube, you're able to reach more people. So you're not just preaching to the choir. Well, same thing with Patreon. So as much as people might hate Patreon, there's that aspect of Patreon. It is the largest funding platform of its kind for monthly subscription or monthly episodic payments. And because it's a platform that's designed to allow people to basically become capital investors in the creation of content, it attracts people who value that. It attracts people, and I can tell you from working on Kickstarter and in Indiegogo projects, I'm one of them. It's really neat to see some of the projects that are concepts or prototypes and to put $5 or $10 into making something happen. Even if you don't, a lot of times like a little computer thing or just some interesting thing, restaurants a lot. I know I'll never be to that restaurant, but I just want that restaurant to exist. I'll give them $5. And it feels good to put money that you've earned towards something that you find valuable. So there's people on these platforms that are in tune with that, and they appreciate the creation of content the same way that people like YouTube, you know, that they find value in the individual's creative efforts. So the platforms, I think, are valuable, but they're not perfect, and there are issues with it. And like Yankee was referring to, there's people that are certainly against it. So let's talk about 2A Fund, which Artisan Tony's in here. He has an alternative funding option. And Tony, why don't you explain what 2A Fund is all about, where it came from?
Well, I mean, I used to be at the opposite end of the spectrum from Patreon, and I've come around in the past 5 to 6 years because I used to think, you know, trying to raise money once a year and giving that lump of money to one organization would make an impact. But, you know, I've kind of changed and gone. I look at my contributions as tithe, like a tithe to the Second Amendment. And so now I'm trying to break up that tithe, you know, evenly, more equally each month instead of trying to do it once a year. And so that's why I'm trying to do a 2afund.com. It's just that concept. But I think Patreon is a great platform, and I think everything that Yankee has said and you have said about it is perfectly correct. And so I'm trying to move more towards I don't know, inspiring people to, excuse me, do more of a, I don't know, like I said, a concept of tithing almost like you would to church, tithe to the Second Amendment each month.
Well,
So,
it's not silly because that's the way I see it too. I give basically all of my Patreon money to the Second Amendment. And that means I'm giving like 50% of my total income every year to the Second Amendment. Well, now I know most people can't afford to do that because they're not old retired guys that already have their house and their car and don't have to worry about trying to make their future. My future is already here. I'm working towards my last days, not planning for the future. And it's the same thing. I try to present a certain percentage. And like you said about crowdfunding, I don't like when people call it crowdfunding because that brings up crowd mentality. I like to look at it as connected funding, because we live in a world now where we're all connected. We don't have to have a fundraiser once a year to realize that there's causes out there and know how to give to them. We can do it daily. We can do it weekly, give $1, because we're so connected and it's so easy to do. You just hit a button and someone else does all the work. You didn't even have to get dressed and go to a fundraiser. So that connected funding is what I think is probably the best thing to happen to us in a long time.
Yeah, and I think your model of giving 5 guns away a month, that's proof there, I think, that it actually works. Yeah,
I couldn't do that without Patreon. There's no way. I could not afford
that. I haven't said too much about it, but Yankee, I really think what you're doing, giving those guns away with that, I really think that's a great project, and I'm glad that you're able to do that.
Shut up.
I won't shut up either.
All right. So it is Every Second Matters, and I've got 65 people watching right now. We've been chatting about funding. That was one of the things after Liberty Doll made that announcement on Patreon. I started reading. I don't know how many people are subscribed to her. You don't have to pay money to people to follow them on Patreon. So you can easily just have a Patreon account, not pay anybody, but follow their accounts and get news in a different way from them. Usually they'll post some version of their alerts or events or reminders and stuff. Anyway, so as I was reading, there's a couple of paragraphs. She's talking about how there was some political repercussion or whatever at her work, or at least a little bit more than she wanted, and it was happening beyond what she could control. Links on Facebook and stuff. So as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, oh man, we're going to lose another ally. We're losing another resource here, and this is a good resource. And then she got to where she said, but I think I'm going to go with she said it, but she's going to go with her gut and go with YouTube, or go with doing the YouTube videos and kick the 9-to-5 job down. And that's neat. So that's encouraging. And, we've got a couple of black eyes lately. I've talked about it on the Daily Gun Show. We've had a couple of chats while we've been watching the House debate the HR 112 and HR 8 as they combined into HRES 145. And moved over to, I guess, the Senate now. But, it's frustrating when you get a black eye, and I think it's everybody's tendency when you get hit to question your strategy, question your tactics, question your resolve, and to lash out and to be frustrated. And this is bad timing. Every Second Matters happens on the second for good or bad. Sometimes it happens right in the midst of horrible crap, and most often it happens in the apathy between. And it's tough to keep people riled up. When there's nothing going on, when there's no challenge, it's easy and kind of I don't know what to call it. When we've got a challenge, everybody's fighting it or chomping at the bit. But when we get a black eye like this, that's something that we've had to adapt to. At least my experience with everybody's reactions to this over the years is, we haven't evolved. We're still learning how to take the black eyes and not get frustrated. I wish there was some little light, like on gun channels. We have a little light when somebody's active online. We can see the little green thing. There was a little green thing somewhere on a map that showed how active or how aware people are with 2A, or they're like little activism light. It'd be interesting to see how those little lights go on and off and when. So part of Every Second Matters is the continual looking at the Second Amendment and awareness to try to keep as many of those lights on as possible. Am I the only one that's had, or let me ask this instead of it that way. What kind of reactions do you guys have after this week? I don't know how much attention you've been paying to it all, but what's your reactions after the week of all this House debate?
I guess you could say it's predictable to a certain extent that the House would pull something like that after gaining, control. But I remain positive or optimistic that hopefully nothing will actually come of it. That may be wishful thinking, but I don't feel down or depressed about it, or I still feel kind of positive about what's going to happen.
I'll say it differently than Tony. I'm hopeful that it won't come to anything, but I'm not optimistic that it will, because I've seen the laziness running rampant in the gun community now. I've seen the corporate poisoning of people's minds when it comes to the Second Amendment. You know how, like, we got taught for many years that, union people being able to organize to get better labor and better wages, et cetera, is a bad thing now. We got taught that over years by big corporate interests. Now we're being taught by big corporate gun interests that being too, firm on what we think the Second Amendment says is a bad thing, that we're not flexible enough. And that has been poisoning the minds of gun people for a long time. And it's going to take a lot to get rid of that. And part of getting rid of that is stopping a lot of the fucking hero worship and thinking that big corporations like Smith & Wesson and Beretta are going to do what's right for us instead of what's right for sales. And, like I said, I'm hopeful that we can reverse the trends that we've been seeing, but I'm not optimistic, because the trends are there and they need to be reversed. And until they are, I just don't know how far this is going to go, because they're going to keep passing things like, people are going to be okay with bump stock bans, and because Colin Noir said it was okay, and Hickok said it was okay, and the NRA said it was okay, and then they're going to be okay, but then later they're going to go, well, we're also going to outlaw AR-15s using the same reason, because we're going to allow the ATF to decide that any gun that is semi-auto can now be treated as a machine gun if you can make it fire fast. That'll be the same thing as they used to ban bump stocks. And since we were okay with it once, we'll be okay. They'll have to be okay with it a second time. They're going to be okay with red flag laws, because John Hickok and his dad are all about how red flag laws are okay and they're not really an infringement, so we're going to be okay with that. And then we're going to have this precedent of surrendering property without due process, so the next time you have to surrender property without due process, when they reverse the order of a conviction and then due process like they want to do with red flag laws, everybody will have to be okay with it because they were okay with it once. And that's what the Congress is doing now. They're going after these things that everyone have been poisoned into thinking is okay, because they know they can expand those into other things later. So I'm not optimistic.
I guess, hopeful is a better word. Optimistic is probably a little overreaching. But you're correct about apathy.
I like to be optimistic, but I guess remain optimistic, but be practical or be realistic, right? Is a better word.
Right.
So,
right.
Looking at the glass half full side of it, when we're talking about the Patreon and any attempts at funding contributions for content creators, we do already see where some, at least Sportsman's Guide, has stood up and used the Patreon platform to support like 40-something content creators over there in hunting and guns and firearms and stuff. So there is the concept when a platform allows content creators to have a community, I guess, that are funded through a community, and all that's public, or at least you can decide to make it public, then the industry, the people that have funds and are making the decisions to spend, tens of thousands of dollars on a print article or tens of thousands of dollars on a online influencer, or some amount of money on some other type of advertising, when there's precedent, or when there's the established, I guess, funding on these platforms, and they see that so-and-so might get $20,000 a month from a couple of people, but this person's getting, $150 from 150 people. Like, that's 150 people that are thinking that this content's worth $1. That gives the industry a lot more insight than the metrics from the large platforms, which, again, when you get large numbers, you have to start figuring out where those numbers come from. It's not all their customers. They don't have that many customers. So they got to figure out where their customers are in that huge number. So I think there's some potential for the ways that we, the traditional means of funding content changing, and that creates content with nuance, and that content with nuance gives people, the audience, more challenge. It gives them something to actually experience, and I think that challenges audience, and that brings the audience up. One of the problems I've always had with YouTube and the concept of appealing to a large audience, the content gets plain vanilla. The reasons behind it we've talked about, but the plain vanilla content creates an audience that just sits on their recliner and watches. They don't expect anything. You know, they get told throw $30 at this national organization and you've done your part. Now get back to watching. You know, pick up the remote control and keep watching. Where individuals, I mean, I'm certainly one to challenge my audience all the damn time, you know, to get up and do stuff. And I know that others, they may not be in your face, like through example, or, you know, like Tony, who must be having internet or whatever, you know, through his example, 5 years of every other week getting to a diversity shoot that he sets up for 2 hours, brings people into the mix, and not getting paid hardly at all for it. You know, he's loving that. And that example is, you know, he's not the only one out there. He just happens to be the one who's got the wherewithal to share it on the internet. But, you know, that's happening out there. And as more and more of those kind of things come to light, there's going to be less and less interest in the blah, 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 plain vanilla crap that appeals to everybody in the world who wants to see something explode or shoot.
I was commenting here.
Yeah, so I've been asking, you know, again, we're trying to make this interactive. This isn't a show, you know, try to be part of this. So throw out there, you know, send us some questions or comments.
I want to deal with one more positive thing. I actually want to take kind of a negative thing here and turn it into a positive, because one person said something like, well, isn't there any way to forgive people who do something fetish? Well, yeah, when they change their behavior, you forgive them if they actually sincerely change their behavior. And another person pointed out, I forget who it was here. I think it was, a guy that comments. It says, Iraqi veteran 888 did some real fetish things and some bad things. And then he reversed himself. He said, I realized where I was wrong. I understand where people are coming from. And he changed his opinions. Whereas someone like Hickok got called on the red flag bans and stuff. And what do? They fucking double down. They try to demonize anyone that isn't agreeing with them. They send people to attack people that aren't agreeing with them. That's not showing any contrition, and that's not changing your opinions. And then someone said, well, what if they eventually change it? Well, that's like saying, what if a trader eventually stops getting paid to be a trader? They're still a trader. But the positive thing is, when someone does do something fetish or something stupid, calling them out is not the same as casting them out. Calling them out is saying, hey, what you just said is ignorant. And if they go, oh, you know, now that I think about it, I see another aspect of it, maybe you're right, and they actually make up for what they said or what they did, that's one thing. That's how you make people change and see things the right way. That's how my experience went. I was very fuddish when I first came into the gun community, and by getting into arguments with people online that I had to finally admit, yeah, you know what, you're right, I'm wrong. That's how I became as big a Second Amendment supporter as I am now, because I was wrong so many times. So calling people out is not the same as casting them out. You only cast them out when they show no desire to do what's right. They only show a desire to do what's profitable. That's when you cast them out.
Yeah, and you do the same thing if somebody's playing song wrong, right? If you're a bunch of musicians, or if they're playing the sports wrong, right? You
learn.
You call the herd, or was that the word? I don't know.
Yeah. If you've got a traitor in your midst, you don't say, well, we've got 100 soldiers. If we get rid of that guy that's selling information to the enemy and stabbing his own people and likely to shoot his own people in the back, we'll be down to 99. We can't do that. No, you shoot that guy in the head and you throw him in the pile, you know, because he is a bigger detriment to you than he is an asset. And you can't be fooled by these people. The people that keep saying that every person is an asset and we shouldn't cast anyone out, those are usually the people that are most in need of being cast out, and they know it. So that's their best defense.
Now, it's different for all of us, I suppose. I don't know where Night Strike's at, but I think all of us grew up with guns. So nobody ever introduced us to guns or anything, but we talk to people all the time who, you know, as adults get introduced to guns or whatever.
My introduction to guns as a young child was, that's loaded, don't touch it.
Yeah, exactly. Like if something happens, this is the one you grab. It's the one that's loaded. So, but in any case, like if you're adult and you're getting introduced to guns or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and wager that just about everybody is going to go through some stages of development where you start with your preconceived notions that are 100% from media, right? I mean, that's how it has to be. If you haven't
or law enforcement and military, a lot of my preconceived notions were from being involved in those two things.
Well, okay, but I'm saying even if you are a cop and you weren't a gun guy, you became a cop, and your first day, whenever it is in the academy, when they introduce you to guns, you're still getting in there. Now you're going to get in a different route than other people who are just going to the gun shop. But I'm thinking everybody has to get past what we're talking about. We're
that was the negative. That was part of my negative ingrainment. It wasn't just from media. It was also from being in the military and law enforcement.
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, that's a whole different
thing. About guns, but you also got this real, very strong opinion shoved into you that it's okay for us to have them, but not them, and that was a real thing that was hard to overcome.
Well, it's really, that's a whole different story, but I guess what I'm getting at is that there's this development that most people are going to go through where they have to experience enough times to get rid of their preconceived notions, and then once they get into the community, figure out where they're interested in finding their niche, and then get comfortable there. So that's where, depending on how loud or how obnoxious they are with their opinions coming in, you're gonna have to interact with the people. So the first time somebody comes in and does something goofy at the range, they're going to be set straight. First time they come into a conversation and say something goofy, they're going to be set straight. But if their first time doing that is online publicly, then guess what? They're going to publicly online be set straight, right? So I'm just saying, I think that to some extent, everybody's going to go through this. Where I think we find the frustration is when people, after years and years and years, are still stuck in that continuing preconceived stupid notions, the pump a shotgun to scare people, that kind of crap. There's just the weird introduction stuff that people have, and the people that don't move on beyond that and somehow stay there for like years and years and years, that's ultimately frustrating to me sometimes. Evolve, come on. Are you even interested in this area of interest? You've got the basic knowledge of it, and you just keep saying that basic stuff over and over and over. Anyway, that's totally off topic.
People get really lost in that preconceived garbage, and and to a degree, the internet contributes to that, because you have so many people say, as long as you do these things, that's all you need to know, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it needs to be. And when it's very seldomly is it that black and white. There's usually, people say, when people teach you this is the one right way to hold a gun, and there's no other right way to hold a gun, there never has been. Well, there's 50 right ways to hold a gun. So people need to experience to broaden their horizons a little bit.
Yeah, it's like the big guy that has upper body strength, like a gorilla, telling some lady how to hold her revolver.
Exactly, and how to stand, how to shape her body, and how to stand when her center of gravity is different than his.
This works for me. Here's how you should hold it. K-Rock saying there's no real organization in the gun community, and a lot of these online chats, people spend more time telling jokes and talking about their latest purchase than discussing the issues. Oh yeah, would we want it any other way? I don't think anybody wants to attend a classroom.
Be boring the other way, yeah.
And we do these once a month, and they can be pretty boring, pretty laborious sometimes, and with almost no. There's is there any?
What's when people a perfect example is there's two perfect examples I can think of. One, when people say, "Why don't you post more shooting videos?" and not because I think they're fucking boring and nobody wants to watch that. And two is another when people get on me they know I go up to the Capitol for the testimonies and stuff. And they're like, "Well, why don't you have video of the process?" Well, one, I don't even know if we're supposed to video of the process, but I think we can. But two, you have to have an understanding of how incredibly boring sitting in these meetings is. In these testimonies, it's hours and hours out of your day that are pure, not only miserably boring, but aggravating, because you have to watch people who have completely ridiculous notions get up and testify in front of a committee with no counter to where what they're saying is actually treated like it was as valuable as the guy who stood up and gave actual information. It's infuriating, it's boring, and no one wants to watch that for 2 hours on the internet, or else C-SPAN would be the biggest channel on cable.
True.
So we don't cover a lot of that.
But when you talk about that, I mean, you, like you're saying, it's just mind numbing sometimes. But if you don't go there and see the reaction, like they say something ridiculous, and you see the reactions, that's input. You're getting something. You're learning from that, right? You're acknowledging. You're figuring out what is reaching the representatives and what's not. What seems to be the keywords or the concerns of the people that were bussed in. So, you're getting ammunition, I guess, to next fight.
And you also see where the politicians themselves are. But it's very frustrating. I mean, like, I got to the point last time when I was there, when someone said something very outlandish on the stand, just completely a lie, but it was being treated like it was gospel because they were standing there giving their testimony. There's no back and forth. There's no counterpoint. So every lie is treated as equally as every truth. And it's infuriating at times. And I leaned over to the person next to me and whispered something to him, which all the anti-gun people that had been bussed in were making way more noise than us the whole time. I lean over and whisper something to him. One of the Bloomberg people in the orange shirts turns around to me and goes, "Shush," and puts his finger up to his mouth and shushes me with a scowly look on his face. And I was like, dude. And then he turned around and did it again. And I was literally so frustrated that my response to him was like I was in junior high school. I was like, shut the fuck up and turn around now. And he did, because I think he realized I was pissed. But I mean, you get frustrated in those things because they are so just, they're just the worst.
And we were watching that on the, I'm going to interrupt Tony, when we were watching that on the House this week. Yeah, it was frustrating as hell, just like you said, because they're putting stuff out there that's just garbage and it's going into the record. But I'm also thinking, and we were, frustrated with the what's the called, like the parliamentary procedures or whatever, which are still not as bad as England, I think, from watching England, but still it's frustrating and boring and monotonous, and you have to pay critical attention because you can't tell what the hell they're saying and everything. But at the same time, we're able to like literally click a button, stop what we're doing in the middle of the afternoon in whatever part of the country we're in, click a button and participate and witness what's happening in our House of Representatives. Pretty neat time to be an activist, a pretty neat time to, be part of all this. There's certainly not a time when we're only hearing about it in the newspapers weeks after. Go ahead, Tony, I interrupted you there.
No, I was just curious if what Yankee was going to were testimony for like legislation.
Yeah, legislative hearings.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah, because you go into these legislative hearings, and basically what they do is they break it up into two groups. They'll have 3 pro and then 3 con for each whatever bills in front of you testify. And the 3 cons or pros or whatever, like the people on the anti-gun side, they can get up there and just say the most outlandish shit. Like they can say, last year in my neighborhood, 10 out of every 12 toddlers were shot by handguns, and it's a problem. No one will challenge them on that. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to even later. If you're up next, you're not even allowed to say that person was wrong, because you can't address another person. Or you can't address something wrong that a senator said or something. So it's so frustrating, just the way the process is. You can get up and say, this year only, this many toddlers were shot, but you can't directly counter the other person who just says 10 out of 12 in her neighborhood got shot. Or, you listen to someone get up there who's being paid by Bloomberg to come from across the country and go, my nephew was killed by a handgun and now we'll never have him again. And he was just a child. And the actual story is her 18-year-old nephew was selling heroin and got shot by someone. He took their money and didn't give them the drugs, but that won't come into the testimony and you can't bring it up later. So it's frustrating.
So Robert's saying on the gun channel side, the antis keep repeating the same misinformation to the point that many believe it is fact. I mean, that's certainly the way that you change public opinion, and that's why I believe it's valid to encourage people to create content. We've got phones that are incredible machines that can record video, audio, and photographs better than anything that I've ever experienced in my time doing this stuff over the last however many years. And doesn't cost much to have the connection to the internet with that phone. In fact, you can probably do that for free if you really wanted to. And We were just looking at a channel the other day. It has nothing to do with guns. It was a guy that was making a concrete countertop. Got 30,000 subscribers and 800,000 views to his first video on YouTube. So we definitely live in interesting times, and there are, to some extent, recipes. There's ways to work with the algorithms and the tubes and wires that make the internet work, and people study that stuff all the time. And with enough insight, you can certainly succeed. And we've talked about ways that projects that are valid that don't get a lot of attention make money, but there's certainly ways to get a lot of attention and glean money off the internet that way. So lots and lots of potential out there.
I hate to have to bail, but I have to go get showered, dressed, to do a little work here so I can afford to pay for those guns that I'm going to be giving to a couple people next month to give away, and then head out to a show and dinner. So, but I wanted to say thanks for having me on, and I will be looking forward to the next second of the month that we can do this again.
Right on. Thanks for being part of the Patch Batch. We'll talk about that a little bit here again. But everybody that's been on today is part of the Patch Batch. It's an effort to get some awareness to some of these projects that aren't using crowdfunding yet, and to get some crowdfunding people experience with these projects. See ya, Yankee. So, Night Strike, what are you going to say? Got you, Night Strike in here now.
No, not a lot I can say other than, we need to, while people say we're only saying this or that, I always tell everyone, when I'm doing my Night Strike stuff, that we need to stay vigilant. We need to continue to, let our voices be heard to our representatives, our congressmen, our senators. And hey, if we need to go out there and do a rally in our state capitol, or hell, even our federal capitol, we need to go out and do that to make sure that they don't rush these things through and, try and circumvent the process. Mic drop.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm reading the comments there.
There was one from John Brown that I saw that does not sound good either. I don't know if they'll be able to accomplish that.
Where's that?
I posted on the side chat.
All right, HR 1263 put semi-autos under NFA.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough. So we're going to experience it with this current one that's going through. We know they have an assault weapons ban. Is that the assault weapons ban, or is that something else? What's
I think that's something else, so they could circumvent not having to, wait for an assault weapons ban.
Let's see what FBC has to say about 1263. I don't think they have it in here. Yeah, they don't have it in here, so I don't know what 1263 is. HR. I don't have it on the FBC site, so I'm not sure which one it is. So we got Tony back again. And there's links out there to a lot of people. I told them we'd run for 2 hours, so we got another about half an hour or so to go, and then I get to go do taxes again. Woo-hoo.
Scheduled for Monday.
We were underground. It's not so bad. The French underground did a lot to help win World War II with the help of industrialized nations behind them. So if there's an industrialized nation that I'm not aware of that can help with the radio and facilitating equipment drops, and then actually bringing in forces after the French resistance offed a bunch of Nazis, right on. But that's not the situation we're going to be dealing with here.
Oh no, we're not going to be a French resistance. We're pretty much, from what I've heard from people from Canada and Australia, we're the last hope. Because once they get us, to not be able to have firearms, those countries are going to get rolled up too, and that's just going to be the end of it.
Yeah, and there are some countries that are moving away from the anti-gun stance. Like case in point, look at Brazil. They're loosening restrictions instead of tightening them.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, no. The Brazilian president, he said the reason why so many people are getting shot is because only the police, the military, and criminals have guns. And it's ridiculous that citizens shouldn't be able to protect themselves. So he loosened some of the gun laws, and some Brazilians in Brazil are now experiencing firearms for the first time, and they're absolutely loving it because now they have easier access to firearms.
Yeah, and the bad guy's going to have that quick learning curve, just like they had to learn in Detroit. Remember when Detroit finally got concealed carry? And it was like, for like a 3 to 6 month period, every week, some bad guy was getting blasted. And it was just not, dudes with neck beards and tattoos. It was grandmoms and little old guys. The victims, the people they looked for as victims.
Now, you just are saying that because you were just aware watching the news or whatever, or was there like some sort of summary or some sort of a book or something written about that situation?
Which one? The Detroit situation or Brazil situation?
Nah, I don't know. I never heard about Brazil, but the Detroit one sounds super interesting because if that's, that sounds like somebody like a lot or somebody should focus on that. That's exactly what
one of the podcasts. One of the podcasts I do is self-defense gun stories on the not firearms radio network, self-defense network. And we were getting stories every week about that and talking about it. One was like a grandmom. I mean, it just went down the list of the population that were usually victims were armed. And the one I remember because it was on the show I was on, Detroit grandmom getting off of work. She takes care of her grandkids, works third shift so she could be there when her daughter goes to work. And, they have an adult in the house. And the guys rolled up on her and tried to steal her car in her own driveway. And she shot 2 or 3 of them. And she caught around herself in her midsection. But I guess it didn't do any damage because she was at home giving the interview like that same day or the next day. But it was like really on and popping for months because we had stories out of there every week out of Detroit.
And that's what, unfortunately you have to have, I guess, stories like that because bad guys are still going to be bad guys even when laws change for some reason. But they say that prison is like crime college, and everybody is aware of word on the street kind of thing. So as word gets out that all of a sudden it goes out both ways, right? The bad guys are figuring out that there might be lethal consequences to jumping anybody on the street now, and the other way around, anybody can think to themselves, hey, I have the potential to defend myself if I'd like to, and because there's that potential, the bad guys don't know who's going to offer lethal resistance. And then what you end up with is, I'm assuming, after all that initial experience, then it went down to very much or probably less violent crime in general.
I can assume that because if you go by now, see, this really sucks because I don't know the study this was done on, but they were talking about violent crime, gang-related crime in major cities, and they can get the numbers down to a couple of dozen people responsible for a significant portion of that violence. Well, if the people that are committing violent crime are getting shot or locked up, those numbers drop and violent crime drops. It's not like someone just jumps in and takes his place. You know what I mean? Because that guy's going to...
people. There's only X amount of people that got that drive to hurt other people for their stuff.
So you took them out. You took that bad guy out, and you took the other one out, and you took the other. Well, that's a summer of getting shot. A lot of these guys just, you know, at least while they're in jail, they're not doing that, because everybody that got shot didn't die, of course. But that knocks crime rates down, violent crime rates. And
Well,
it
and of
helps
course
people.
there is a vacuum that's created, like in organized crime, like gangs and organized crime. Somebody's going to jump in there, but there is a lag at least, you know.
Yeah, there's a lag, and then the stories gets around and get around through the neighborhoods. You know, Miss Johnson got her carry permit, and she shot that one guy. It's like, oh yeah, maybe I should get mine too. And it's
Yeah.
just word of mouth, and it grows.
Mm-hmm. And then that now they know Miss Jones or Mr. Smith or Bob, whatever, you know, has a firearm, and when they're told by the media all firearms owners are XYZ, well, I know 4 people that aren't XYZ, so their message
Exactly.
won't be as effective. Just can't be.
And we talk about it a lot, how important grassroots are. Well, that's grassroots. That's people talking at the Starbucks or at the barbershop or hairdressers, because everyone gossips about neighborhood stuff, you know?
And these ladies weren't like, probably, I'm assuming some of these ladies weren't like unaware of firearms, and then the law passed and they said, hey, I'm going to go to Tony's diversity shoot, learn about firearms, and start carrying. They probably were just like, oh, now I can carry legally, or you know, now I'm carrying legally, period. Let's just put it that way. And when these, like you say, when the hair dryers are going and they're having their discussions, it's not like, you know, oh, that, you know, oh, something fell out of her purse, oh my goodness. It's like, oh yeah, that's in there behind my gun, you know, grab that perfume out behind my gun. You know, now it's not, it's a casual thing. It's not something they have to assume that they're criminals and they can't talk about it, because, you know, even though they know that they carry a gun and they suspect all their friends are carrying guns, they're not going to talk about it at the beauty parlor. And now that's not there anymore. Now they can talk about it at the beauty parlor, and maybe it's like, oh, your husband bought you a stupid 357 J frame. Now check out this, you know, Walther 380. It's much funner to shoot, and it's, you know, I can take it to the range, and now that lady's buying her second gun or something.
Exactly, and that, dang, there's a woman in Detroit, and also Rick Ector. Rick Ector is a firearms instructor out of out of Detroit, and I think the number he got last year was training 500 women at one time. He made it into a weekend event, I think, and he trained them for free with, of course, sponsors and whatnot. But that's what he's been doing the last couple of years, getting up to train 500 people at a time, just for that women's weekend. I thought it was awesome. Now it's an open thing. You can have a conversation. Even if you carried in your purse illegally because you had no carry permit, you didn't talk about it in public.
No,
you'd
be intentionally, and that's one of the reasons they persecute stuff, right? Reasons they make it illegal. And they know that it's, I mean, they were challenged multiple times, both in the discussions going into the to the House, and then in the actual thing, they brought it up in the actual House debate, that this is not going to address anything. It hasn't, you know, they suggest that the epidemic is the mass murders that are, you know, the people politically choose to use a firearm, and no talk at all. In fact, I didn't hear any talk about the concept that, you know, a lot of procedures and protocols now are, once a mass murder happens, no matter what it is, they either do or do not rush in. But in a lot of cases, there's no treatment for the wounded. And now people that, you know, at one time, you know, it might have been a bunch of people wounded. Now people start to bleed out, and now there's higher casualty rates. No discussion on that or any kind of need to investigate anything like that. But instead, just to suggest that all these firearms things are violent. And anyway, I'm trying to read the talk at the same time. Go ahead.
He was agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the bad part is, again, we looked. Rob, who runs the event, Rob Morse, runs the show. He's the actual host. Each week, he brings in one defensive firearms instructor, and what he does is just search those local stories in those areas. None of that stuff ever makes the national news, and it doesn't even get spread across really the gun community. You know what I mean? Like every now and again, you heard about the incident in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, where the kid defended his dad's home against the 3 guys that broke in with the knives and the brass knuckles, and he killed all 3 of them. That was a big story because it even hit the front page of major newspapers. But there's between 2 million and 250,000 civilian self-defense firearm uses every year. We do not hear about those, and they make sure we don't. And a lot of these people don't fit the stereotypical, redneck gun owner. Hold on.
Yeah, we've had discussions on this one. I don't know, not really recently. My tendency is to not focus on any of the lawful uses like that, like you're talking about, literally the focus of their show. I mean, obviously, it's neat and everything, and there's nothing wrong about it or whatever. It's just that when we're talking about rights or whatever, there's a couple of issues I see, a couple of just strategic things, I guess, more than anything. One is that I like to think that eventually we'll have no crime, right? Eventually humans will move on to a point where there's no crime. And when that happens, I don't want them to then go, and now we don't need guns anymore, because I really, really want to have my guns. Then there's no crime. Then we can have full auto and have real fun shooting guns. But so I just don't like the justification of firearms self-defense. Like, I mean, it's a valid, necessary reason for firearms, but it's not our only reason we own them, for sure. But then there's people that are not interested in that. They're not interested in their own self-protection. They just see every death as a bad thing, and they're never going to carry a gun, and it just doesn't appeal to them. So I just think it falls on people that are not, what's the word, like of the mind to survive, and it just falls short. In fact, they probably disagree with a lot of that. So I think by looking at that, when crime, and the other thing is crime rates are falling, it makes it seem like it's in order to keep talking about stuff like that, it gives the perception that we're high crime. Like, because it's like anything, if you talk about it, it gives the impression that it's worthy of being talked about. Not to suggest that it's not worthy of being talked about. It's just that since we have declining crime rates, if we talk about it constantly, it would give the perception that there's at least constant crime or more, when in reality it's going down. It'd be the same as if we had suicide rates that were dropping. If we talked about suicide every day, it would almost seem as though suicide was a big deal. And that's one of the things they'll use on the other side, is to every time there's an atrocity, a mass murder where somebody decides to use a firearm because they know they're going to be infamous, and the media will take that story and run with it, or they might not, with an arson or some other kind of mass murder. It's that same concept. If we talk about it too much, then it seems as though it's happening more. But it's a tough one, because it's not that they're not valid, and obviously there's plenty of positive reasons to address those topics, but I don't know, maybe it's just not sexy. That's why we don't see it in a lot of content out there.
Well, I look at it as it's the only sexy one, because and I think we need to attack this at every level. We need to go with the suicide thing. We need to go with the crime thing. We need to go with the tyranny thing. But if you think someone doesn't draw a parallel, like crime is dropping, and using a firearm for self-protection is not as necessary as it was because crime is dropping. But you try to tell that same person that the reason you have a firearm is because of tyrannical government in the United States, they're not going to definitely buy that one, because we haven't, had a tyrannical government, since 1776, according to some people that lead with feelings and not intelligence or wisdom or knowledge of history.
Knowledge, yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, we just have to hit it at all levels and hope we can appeal to someone on some level, any level, and we can have a discussion.
And you make a point there, because if let's say there was no crime, the reason there would be no crime is because there'd be a reason to not do crime, right? Because that's why there would be no crime. It's not like everybody's just going to decide. I don't know. So the reason that there would be lower and lower crime is because there's but the reason there's lower and lower fire is because there's more and more fire extinguishers, right? The reason that there's lower fire is because more people know that a fire starting is the beginning of a really bad thing. Like, put it out immediately. So, the reason that there's less crime is because people know that criminal activity needs to be dealt with immediately and put out. And that requires fire extinguishers. That requires people to carry firearms. So you're right. Even if crime is going down, or as it goes down, that's no reason to not carry a firearm. It's just like insurance. Just because you've been driving safely for a long time, you don't say, well, I've been driving safely for a long time, let's get rid of that insurance. I'm probably not going to need it tomorrow.
You also have to look at it from a different perspective as well, because remember, the Second Amendment was put in at a time where the government was trying to take guns away from people. And again, when they made the Second Amendment, made the Constitution, if somebody broke into somebody's house as a criminal and went and was trying to do something and got shot, you didn't have a district attorney at the time trying to crucify you for shooting a criminal. No, they just dragged the body out of the house and buried it. They didn't crucify the person, so they didn't think they needed to put stuff like that in there to protect the right of the people to keep and bear arms. They figured that was all encompassing. Unfortunately, today you got people that want to nitpick every little minute detail and try and take things away from people.
And thankfully, they were smart enough to put commas in the sentences. So.
Thank God. Thank God.
I really, because we all know human nature hasn't changed, and they were politicians too. I just wondered, did they look at it and go, no one would suck this bad that they would argue over something this simple? I mean, did they think they wrote it specifically enough that you couldn't argue with it? I mean, it's just a question that just popped in my head every now and again, because these were very intelligent people.
I don't think they thought ever if someone would ever be that petty. But Look at where we are now.
Hey, I live in Jersey, where pretty much you need to win the fight after the fight. I mean, it dictates what I use for a home defense firearm. Yes, I have an AR-15, but I will not use it to defend my home against a break-in, because in Jersey, being a Second Amendment advocate, firearms instructor, going in front of a jury of my peers with a kill death machine? No. So I have a pump action shotgun as my home defense firearm. You can try as you must, but you're not going to play off a pump action shotgun as some kind of deadly assault rifle, at least not at this point in our history.
I've got a 1911. I use my 1911 because 7 rounds. It's under most states. It's under most states. Magazine limit. Some states are even more petty, but
okay.
Regardless.
Yeah, let me tell you about petty, because New Jersey is the home of petty.
I know.
It is the home of petty. They had a 70-something-year-old history teacher, retired. He does documents. He's one of those document collectors, Revolutionary War period document collectors. He purchased some document from a guy offline. Goes to the guy's house. The guy has, I don't know if it belonged to someone else, and he was like, here's all his stuff. And the teacher was like, what's this? And he was like, well, that's a flintlock pistol from that time period. He was like, well, what am I going to do with that? He was like, I don't know. You can take pictures, and it like adds ambiance to the photos of your documents. Yeah, whatever. He takes it. He throws it in his glove compartment. He takes his papers home. Of course, he forgets that thing's in his glove compartment. Gets pulled over a few days later, reaches into his glove compartment for
I heard about this
registration. Cop says, what's that? He goes, oh. And he tells the cop the story about the flintlock pistol. Cop was like, well, you're going to have to turn that over to us because, you don't have a firearms ID card and you didn't have a pistol purchase permit when you got it. He was like, okay, fine. Here, I didn't even want it. He gives him the gun. Guy goes home. Next day, they knock on his door and arrest him because the DA decided to make a big deal about it. Because this guy had an illegal firearm placed where a gun shouldn't be. And they were actually going to run ballistics test on his gun to see if it was used in a crime.
Well, they might be able to solve some 18th century murders with that gun.
Well, that's what happened because this guy was a retired teacher. He was about to lose his pension. If he got convicted of a felony, he would lose the money he had coming in. Even if they
Or owning a relic.
convicted him.
I was being sarcastic there, but
It's a relic.
you know.
Yeah, well, not in Jersey. If you have a black powder and you purchase it in New Jersey, you need a firearms ID card
Flintlock.
and a pistol picture.
And
what was that?
Here's the thing: under the ATF, the ATF says
some states
they're not.
It doesn't matter. Some states will put their own definitions on what a firearm is, and some of them will just say expanding gas, and that'll include air rifles. Some of them will say like from a expanding expansion of what's the word, flammable or combustible gases, and in that case it covers all black powders. If they say something about a cartridge, then they're more in lines with federal, but states do have their own more restrictive infringement laws.
Now, this is the crazy part. I can purchase a black powder pistol or rifle in any other state and bring it back to Jersey, and I don't need any paperwork even here. But if I bought it here, hey, remember the old Crossman pump action pistol? They call it the American now. A lot of people had it growing up. I wanted one because it allows me to shoot in the backyard. It's $65 at the gun store down that I used to drive past in Jersey, but I had to get a pistol purchase permit, which meant wait between 30 days and 3 months to get one, plus pay for my fingerprints to be processed, plus yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, it was going to cost me another $80 on top of the $65 air gun. Or I just stopped at Walmart in PA, picked it up, and came home with it. That's what I live in. This is the petty state. Oh, the guy's lawyer got him off and pretty much publicly embarrassed the prosecutor. Said, okay, buddy, who are you going to catch when you do the ballistics on this pistol? I'm sure everybody involved is dead. Who are you going to question? Like, he just asked all these questions with the local news media, embarrassed the guy, and he dropped all charges on this old man.
Well, then again,
ridiculous.
One of the reasons we have discussions like this is people that are frustrated and looking for something to do. We're not here to ask for money, or we're here to give you ideas. So if you've got time and you've got an inclination, that's something that should be consequences. If they're gonna, I mean, this is a case that's older, but grab any case that you can find either locally or something like that had some national attention, and put some effort into archiving the situation, stir up old stories like that one, and remind people not to give the system some scrutiny, to give the individuals the consequences and the reputation that they deserve. But there's the waste of money, there's the waste of time, there's the guy's reputation and his expenditure, time and expenses. And that's a victim. That's someone who's a victim of these laws. They'll say, if it saves just one, well, what are the consequences of these laws? Let's start amplifying those. We talked about entire shows devoted to justifiable or necessary defense with a firearm. Well, these are other things that are less sexy and less interesting. And if we depend on the people that are out there creating entertainment in the name of firearms, what we're going to get is stuff that's super interesting, super fun to watch, super neat, because that'll bring in ratings and that'll bring in numbers and that'll keep everybody's machines running. But if that's all we want from the internet, that's all we're going to get from the internet. If we put information out there like I'm suggesting that gets into holding people accountable, holding feet to fire, making people aware, and encouraging others to participate and to figure out ways to do that so that you're motivated and you're financially able to do it at a scale, at a level that you're able to fund it with the time you need to do it, then that adds a lot more nuance, a lot more stuff to the conversation, a lot more voices to the effort. And when the antis come along and want to do the same old, you'll have created something that we can all point to and say, this is what they're going to do again. It's a lot easier for a politician to find data online, or the politician's research team to find information online if you've already gathered it and you've put it there for them. That's a valuable skill. It takes nothing but time, very little money. If you have issues with money, talk to me or Night Strike. I can guarantee you we will get your stuff online for nothing. So anybody that's out there being frustrated and shaking your fist at the sky and suggesting that everybody out here is trying to exploit the situation and change the fucking situation with your own actions, with your own intent, and with your own skills and with your own time. Until then, we'll see you all next week or next month, I guess.